We're combining all the best old school wisdom with all the top new school methods to bring you the optimal way to coach and play the great game of baseball. This is the 80-20 Baseball Masterclass with Coach Bo.
Welcome, everybody. This is Coach Bo. This is the 80-20 Baseball Masterclass. Welcome, coaches, parents, players. Happy 2021. Happy New Year to all of you. And as always, thank you for joining us here every Tuesday as we cover all the key strategies that lead to better baseball and a better team environment, a better youth sports community, a better youth baseball community, a better baseball community in general. So here we are, 2021. We are on episode 59, but this is the first episode of the new year. We got 3 parts today to this episode. Before we get into part 1, I'm going to read a quote that I found from Tom Landry, the late great Cowboys coach. That is the Dallas Cowboys, not to be confused with the super well-known Wyoming University Cowboys, nor all you awesome PBR rodeo Cowboys. And now that we got that straightened out, let's saddle up this quote. Leadership is a matter of having people look at you and gain confidence. If you're in control, they're in control. So what Tom Landry is saying here is leadership is a matter of people looking at you. Leadership as a coach is a matter of having your players look at you and gain confidence, not lose confidence. They want to see a coach that's in control emotionally, also with the planning and strategies. A confident coach, not an arrogant or egotistical coach, but a confident coach, somebody who stands tall, is measured, and is in control. The players want to see this, and the younger the player, the more they want to see this. Older players, college players, professional players, they're becoming young adults, or they already are adults, so they have this built-in level of control that they've developed over years, so they're not as reliant on a coach. But in the youth sports world and high school sports world, in youth baseball and high school baseball, players need to see a coach that is in control, and it looks different depending on what's going on. So at the beginning of practice, you want to come out there, you want to show that you have a plan, that you're confident in your plan. Also, when things aren't going right, when the team's making some errors, are you in control of your emotions? Are you calm and collected? So they will feed off of that. We hear that a lot. They'll feed off of that. Players will feed off of coaches. And I can't tell you how many times I've been out there on the baseball field or on a football field or a basketball court, coaching, playing, and the coach or the coaches, they lose control and the players just follow right in line. And it's a domino effect. Coaches, follow this quote from Tom Landry. Leadership is a matter of having people look at you and gain confidence. It's a matter of having your players look at you and gain confidence that you're in control, thus they're going to be in control. That's a big one. I think that quote is really, really important. As a leader, they want you to be in control. So as 2021 moves forward, let's really key in as coaches and parents on being in control and setting the standard. Let's set the tone of controlled confidence. Now, internally, you may be frustrated. Internally, you may be upset, but what you need to show on the outside as a leader is not necessarily pure stoicism, like where there's no emotion, but you need to limit and really reduce and minimize the emotion that you're showing. Phil Jackson, the great basketball coach, Phil Jackson, probably did this as well as anybody at the most elite levels, but all throughout his career, he was phenomenal at what he did. And so many people would watch Phil Jackson, the Bulls and Lakers coach, and think that he's just not involved or he's not interested or he's not excited about the game, and nothing could have been further from the truth. He knew that if he showed control, that if he stayed in control, his players would also stay in control for the most part. Again, it's not a complete guarantee, but it definitely will set the tone. Now, for some strategies to stay in control. One, keep it in perspective. It's youth sports. It's not the end of the world. You don't have your finger on the nuclear bomb button back during the Cold War. All right. This isn't World War II. This isn't life and death. It's youth sports. Okay, it's youth sports. And at the end of the day, nobody's probably going to remember these scores that much, and they're not going to make that big an impact in the future. What's going to make a huge difference on society, your coaching, what's going to make a difference with what you do as a coach is what you instill in your players in terms of teamwork, hustle, learning to make failure productive, finding enjoyment in the grind, in the day-to-day process, believing and subscribing to delayed gratification, etc., etc., etc. That's what's important. That's what's going to be remembered and utilized moving forward with all of your players as a coach. And players, for you, that's what's most important. Whether you won 17 games in Little League as a 12-year-old, or you won 23 games, or you won 11 games or 7 games, is not going to do much for you when you get to 25, when you get to 35, and life really starts to be a challenge, or when life brings you challenges as an adult. Drawing it back to the point to help stay in control, I think you need to avoid being focused on the score, because that can draw out emotion, and usually it's not good emotion, or it drives you emotionally, and that's never a good place to be for the most part when it comes to sports and youth sports. So not focusing on the scoreboard as much, but more on the process, and understanding that you got to keep it in perspective. You got to keep it in perspective. All right, this is not life and death stuff. This is not life and death stuff. This is youth sports. It should be enjoyable and fun. And at the end of the day, no matter what, if you win and lose, I'll tell you what, here's one thing you could look at. This is how they should keep a record for each coach. This is what your record should show. It should show not how many wins and losses you had. Now, if you want to have that, maybe there's 2 separate records. But at the end of the day, it should say that you had, say you played 20 games or 25 games, it had your win-loss total. And then right next to that, it said you had 13 players on your roster, and 13 players became better human beings at the end of the year. What was your record? Were you 13 for 13? Were you 13-0 and getting your players better and more ready for the real world, for the world of becoming an adult, for the future? Did you prepare them and help them out? Were you 13-0? Were you 6-7? Were you 1-12? Were you somebody that was so focused on winning and losing, you were a transactional coach, not a transformational coach? You should be 13-0. If you have 11 players on your team, your goal should be 11-0. Change 11 players, or I should say help players want to change themselves, improve themselves to be better people. Now, we're going to get into that kind of separate record, and I think coaches, we need to start keeping a record of how many players. Now, it's much harder to measure that, but I think if you look at it subjectively and objectively, both, you're going to be able to assess whether you improved the players by the end of the year in terms of making them better people. All right, let's get into part 1 here. You got to get your systems, your routines in place now. You got to get them in writing. You got to get your routines, your systems in place early before the season starts. You can always adjust them as you move forward, but you got to have a base system, routines in place, a practice structure in place. And I recommend you get it in writing now. Systems and routines are not systems and routines unless you get them in writing, at least until all the players can learn all the routines in the system by heart. So until they do that, you need to have it in writing. And I recommend just have it in writing, have a system, have routines in place, your warm-up routine, your throwing routine, your batting practice routine, your strength and conditioning routine, your drills, how they operate, your rules, how you're going to deal with parents, your expectations of players, your pregame routines, your postgame routines, things like that need to be put in writing. Get those down now. All the key steps should be identified and ordered correctly. Now, ideally, you could do a very detailed plan, a very detailed system, a plan of your routines, but at least at a minimum, you should have written down, typed out, saved all the key steps. Here are the 3 major benefits that come with having a system and routines in place. Number 1, it allows players to feel a sense of autonomy. It allows players to feel a sense of autonomy because they learn and know the routines and thus can run them themselves. They can do the drills, they can do the routines, they can do the warm-up, the throwing routine, the drills, the post-game, the pre-game routine by themselves for the most part. This is very important. Players want and feel really, really good and feel like they have a say. They feel like they're a part of the driving force behind what you're doing when they have autonomy. Now, you're not necessarily giving them complete autonomy because you're prescribing the routines and it's your system, although you can always ask for input. You definitely should ask for input from your other assistant coaches or the other coaches on the staff, but it doesn't hurt to ask your players with the clear caveat that you're not going to just install their suggestions into the system, into the routine just because they brought them up, but they definitely will be considered. Now, kids don't like being bossed around. They just don't. And if you don't know that, then you haven't been around kids at all. All right, so you took one of those Elon Musk shuttles, those rockets to Mars, you've been over there for a little while, and kids don't like being bossed around. And when a routine is set, and you as the coach don't have to bark out orders over and over again, players win and you win. Let me say that again. When the system, the routine, when I say system, I'm talking about the routines and the procedures that your team goes through on a practice, on a pregame, during the game, post-game, pre-practice, post-practice routines. When those routines are set, you won't have to bark out orders. You won't have to explain and instruct and lead everything as a coach. And this allows players to win because they get it a sense of autonomy, and it allows you, the coach, to win because you don't have to sit there and waste a bunch of energy, bleed out a bunch of energy that you could be saving for a lot more important purposes. So it's a win-win. Take the time up front to set the routines, the procedures, the system in place so you can have a much easier time as you move forward. Not only that, benefit number 2 from having a system and routines and procedures in place from the get-go. When players know the system and the routines, that sense of autopilot, all right, this is coming from the coach's standpoint, the coach's viewpoint, that sense of autopilot allows you, the coach, to build up the players' skills and technique much faster because you, the coach, can then use that energy that you haven't wasted having to run every drill through and through step by step. It allows you to allocate that energy, allocate more of your time to improving the players' individual skills, their technique, their movement patterns, etc. This is huge. If a coach or coaches need to direct a drill, that limits inherently their time to coach up their players' skills and individual needs. So if you get the base running smoothly, if you get the foundation of the practice running smooth and on autopilot, and I shouldn't say smooth, it's not always going to run smooth. There's always going to be little hiccups. But if you can get it running on autopilot as much as possible, it will allow you, the coach, the time that you need or a lot of extra time to coach up the skills, the individual technique, the individual movement patterns of each player. So it's a win-win. So you're actually getting deeper into the improvement process. It also allows you, and this is more important than even teaching skills and technique and movement patterns and whatnot, it allows you, the coach, if you have the practice running on autopilot for the most part, the players know how to do it, they know how to run it on their own, it allows you as a coach and as a coaching staff to build relationships with your players. Remember, you're not building friendships, you're building relationships and trust. You're getting to know them. You can pull a player off to the side, check in with them, see how they're doing, because you don't have to run the entire drill. You don't have to sit there blowing the whistle. You don't have to sit there yelling, all right, go. You can have everything on autopilot for the most part. That allows you, the coach and the coaching staff, to build rapport with your players on a personal level, because that's really going to move the needle when it comes to the team culture and more winning. Now, for the third benefit that I'm going to outline here, having a scripted system, scripted routines allows coaches to better assess their methods. It eliminates more of the random variables, and also it makes it much easier to adjust. I am constantly optimizing my systems and routines as a coach. This is something I've done for years, making them more efficient. I'm looking to make them more efficient and more aligned with game success and team culture success. I have my systems all scripted out, so when I need to make an adjustment, I can simply grab my clipboard, my phone, my iPad, or when I get home, get my MacBook and quickly make the adjustments. I then can send it quickly to all the other coaches via PDF on a text message or an email. Done and done. A question some of you may have right now is, how often do I implement the adjustments? I do my very best to implement the adjustments between seasons when it's big stuff, when it's wholesale changes. I try to make those adjustments between seasons, after the season, during the summer, before the fall, before the winter season, before the spring season. I try to make those adjustments between seasons if they're big wholesale adjustments. Typically, at my stage in my career, I don't have big wholesale adjustments. But a lot of young coaches and newer coaches, you may have wholesale adjustments because you just flat out find your strategy, your system, your routines, your procedures is flat out aren't working, or you want to completely change them to something that is completely different with the goal of improving. But when it comes to the minor adjustments, the little adjustments, that's ongoing. That's continuous. You're always looking to improve. You're always looking for little adjustments, things to make your practice run faster, things to make the drill more authentic, safer, whatnot. Now, it's important to know that I am very transparent, and I recommend you be very transparent with players when making an adjustment. And I tell them exactly how it's going to benefit them and the team, how the team is going to win more games, how the team culture is going to be better, how it's going to be a better environment for everybody, how it's going to be a win-win-win. I give them a quick sell. We talked about this before. I give them the quick sell. I think it was episode 56. We dove into this, getting player buy-in, giving them a quick sell. You're trying to get that buy-in, and then I move on. I don't sit there and rationalize. I don't spend much time. I explain to them how it's going to benefit them and the team. I give them maybe an example that they can relate to, maybe somebody who's doing it that they're familiar with, a professional player, or another outside of baseball, outside of sports life example, and I share with them, sometimes use an example from school or other things that they can really relate to, or at least most of the players can relate to, and then I move on. So you got to get the buy-in, a little bit of buy-in when you make adjustments or you're implementing new things, but don't go too far with it. Get the buy-in and move on. Please trust me on this. I'm going to save you a lot of headache and a lot of time. So to recap, the major benefits, the three major benefits that I see, and there are definitely extra benefits on top of these three, but the three major benefits that come from having a system, having your routine scripted out in place, having your procedures done in place. It allows players to have autonomy and let them kind of lead the way. It gives you as a coach more time to do other things that are super important, like building rapport and also improving individual skills. And like say you want to work on a swing, but if you're having to run batting practice, or you have to run the throwing routine, the throwing program at the beginning of practice, or whenever you get to it, if you have to run it, you can't necessarily be helping individual players with their throwing technique and their movement patterns, etc. This is huge. And lastly, having this stuff scripted out allows you to better assess your methods, because you're eliminating just random hodgepodge ideas and you're just throwing stuff at the wall hoping to stay. You're kind of just using all sorts of different things, and you really can't then gauge or assess accurately, because there's so many variables, how your stuff is working or not working. There's a lot of benefits to it, and I definitely think it's worth the time to not only script it out, plan it out ahead of time before you even get to the field, but then when you get there early on as the season starts, as the spring season starting up, put this in right away. Take the time early. Don't feel like you need to get into a 5-hour batting practice, bullpens, play a bunch of scrimmages, yada, yada, yada. Get the procedures, the routines in place early on, and then you can build from there. It's going to make the season and your players a lot better. All right, part two, we're going to get away from the systems. We're going to get away from the plan and routine. We're going to talk nutrition. So I was reading an article in Baseball America, or on baseballamerica.com, about the Dodgers and nutrition. And this is a quote from Matt Beatty. Matt Beatty's a infielder, outfielder. He's a platoon player, really good hitter. He's talking about the Dodgers system. And I've discussed this on other episodes. They were one of the first to revamp their nutritional, their dietary, their food procedures and process, and things that how they keep their players' stomachs full on good, healthy food before and after the games. So it's a pre-game, pre-practice, and a post-game recovery structure. And here's what Matt Beatty said. Now, remember, the Dodgers have been to the World Series 3 times in the last 4 years, and they just won it this last year. And he says this, quote, "It's good eating. A lot of other guys in other organizations, they just get leftover concession stand food or peanut butter and jellies. I know I did when I was playing pro ball. It was peanut butter and jelly sandwiches and a banana, and this was not the good bread. You're talking about the crappy bread. The peanut butter and jelly was the knockoff stuff. It wasn't even like the actual name brand. Not that that's any better, but it was just basically going as cheap as they could, and the bananas were half brown. And so back to his quote, he said, "We definitely have it lucky. We're definitely lucky here in this organization, in the Dodgers organization." The article goes on to quote a scout from another team, and he says, "You go in and watch the Dodgers play, and it's noticeable how good a shape their guys are in. I just think they're a little ahead." So the opposing scouts notice it, the players at the major league level know it, and this is a quote from I believe it's one of the nutritionists or their dietitians, their team dietitians. "We get players who are really young, and a lot of times the lowest hanging fruit is simply helping guys mature physically." Youth coaches, high school coaches, if this applies to professional, if they're saying we get young players, well, they're a lot older than your players for the most part, or at least high school coaches, they're older, and for youth coaches, they're a lot older. And youth players are really developing physically. They're really maturing. They're going through growth spurts. They're going through a lot of physical changes. Going on, quote, "Our performance and medical staffs are excellent. We feel like we have the best strength and conditioning out there. Combine that with the nutrition, and a lot of the jumps you see in our players from year to year simply comes from being in fantastic shape." I think it's very important not to fool ourselves when you say, oh, we're dealing with youth players and they can get away with not eating well and they can get away with not having good nutrition or adequate hydration. You're lying to yourself. Yes, their body fat percentage may not show it like a 40 or 50-year-old with the big old belly, because it eventually catches up in terms of weight gain. But performance is not all about weight gain. Performance is about, hydration is something that has nothing to do with, being 300 pounds when you get to 40 because you continue to eat poorly. It's important to understand that performance at the youth level is influenced by nutrition. And so I remember reading another article years ago, I think it was like 3 years ago, that the Dodgers came in and basically just went all organic with the food in the locker room. They brought in chefs. And I believe the Dodgers, and I think we talked about this, I believe they have 2 major league chefs. They have 2 chefs in the locker room, and I think the chefs travel with them. So they have chefs. In fact, they have chefs, team chefs, not somebody who comes in and just puts bananas on the table and whatnot. They have chefs for most of their minor league teams. I've shared with you when I was playing in the minor leagues that the food and the nutrition and the per diem amount and the options to eat post game were just flat out terrible. And we're talking 2003, 2004, 2005. This wasn't that long ago. This wasn't the 1980s, okay? Just flat out terrible. Flat out terrible. And it wasn't as though the nutrition information wasn't there. It was just not prioritized. It wasn't thought of as something important, or at least it didn't show, because they were feeding us absolute garbage, giving us $20 per diem and dropping us off at the Ramada at 10:30 p.m. after a game, and then looking out there and going, well, here are our two options. We got Domino's and Waffle House. And I'll tell you what, when you're eating really, really bad quality peanut butter and jellies and half brown bananas before the game, and then you're eating Waffle House after the game, you're eating Domino's pizza after the game, you're not going to be playing at peak performance. No way. And I know there's a lot of factors involved here, but that was pretty sad to see. But it's good to see that teams are now, I think, going to follow, because when teams start to win, they start to break down what other teams are doing. So the Dodgers have had a lot of success, and they've been doing things differently than other teams. And I think other teams are going, okay, sure, it isn't all one thing that's changed and made them a World Series team. All right, they won this last. Mookie Betts was a stud when they got him this last year. All right, Mookie Betts is a confident, awesome player, a great team player, and a heck of an addition that put him over the top. But at the end of the day, it all breaks down these foundational things that really raise up the level of the game out there on the field and the level of productivity. Nutrition is super important, youth coaches. There are some simple things you can be doing here, like hydration, having players come with bottled water, or a way to see how much water they have and just break it down into some simple ounces and say, all right, we're going to drink as soon as you get here. Before we even start going, I want to have everybody drink 16 ounces of water or 10 ounces of water, depending on how old your kids are. Now, when I throw out these amounts of, like, say, water, again, it's going to vary. Everybody's hydration level is different. Everybody's weight is going to be different and whatnot, and needs are going to be a little different, but at least it gives you a ballpark, kind of an idea. Get out there and you say, you know what, you just know that you want your players to have water. Now, hot days, maybe a little bit more. And you know, if you can give them 16 ounces, if you can watch them with your own two eyes drink, say, 16 ounces before the game, or I should say before you even start your warm-up routine, and then an additional 16 ounces, an additional 2 cups right before the game starts, or 10 minutes before the game starts, at least then you know they have 4 cups of water in them going into the game. You could also have them say that they have a water bottle, a 16-ounce water bottle that they have to finish by the end of the game, and then you can check it and say, hey, let me see your water bottle, little things like that. Now, if you think that's micromanaging, it's really not. It's actually something that's super important, because the body is made up of a lot of water, and hydration plays a big part in performance. A lot of people know about cramps, but there's more to it than just that. So that's a simple example of utilizing water, and not just saying, hey, stay hydrated. Hey, kids, drink some water, but actually having a system where you have your players show up with 3 16-ounce water bottles. Players, I need you to show up to the field with 3 16-ounce water bottles, or they have water bottles that they can just refill that are in that range of 16 ounces or bigger, and then they can just kind of level down. And sometimes water bottles, a lot of these water bottles for sale that you can buy on Amazon or at Walmart or Target or any of these stores, have the actual ounces on there. So they come to the field with 3 sets of 16 ounces. Now they could have a 32-ounce water bottle and then another 16-ounce water bottle, or 2 32 ounces. My point is this: I would have a standard routine of drinking 16 ounces before you even start warming up, another 8 to 16 ounces, so another cup or 2 before the game starts, and then have them drink a cup during the game. If it's really cold weather, you may not need as much. If it's really hot weather, southern states in the summertime, that may be the right amount. Okay, you can kind of mess with that and kind of tinker with that, talk to the players, ask them how they're feeling, but it's important that they have a consistent inflow of water. That's a simple example of getting the hydration better. Another one would be eating a piece of fruit before they start to play, before they start to practice, whether it's an orange, a banana, strawberries, just having them eat a serving of fruit. These are little things that add up. And I think having a system, a routine in place for things like that, even nutrition, is very advantageous, because during practices and during games and game days, things get a little hectic. It's nice to have some structure there that you can fall back on and go to. All right, part 3 of episode 59. We're going to swing over to the hitting approach. We're going to talk real quick about the hitting approach quantified. We've discussed the hitting approach, the 2 hitting approaches, the less than 2 strike hitting approach, and the 2 strike hitting approach that every player should and needs to have. These are the optimal hitting approaches. There's other good approaches. These are the 2 optimal. We've discussed them. I've discussed them at length. You have the less than 2 strike approach. You have your 2 strike approach. And then there was plan take, which was kind of that third plan was, hey, I'm not going to swing at this pitch. I'm going to do some reconnaissance. I want to see a pitch before I swing. But the actual two approaches that you are going to use, the hitters will use, that you're going to coach hitters to use, are the less than 2 strikes and the 2-strike approach. That's it. That's all they need. And I want to share some numbers with you really quick, and we'll finish off this episode with these numbers. Here you go. Major League numbers from 2019. Slugging percentage on pitches. Hold on, let me back up. These numbers that I'm going to share with you are going to show and be evidence as to why, with less than 2 strikes, your plan A approach, as I call it, the plan A hitting approach, when you get in the box, hitters with less than 2 strikes, you have your plan A approach. Your plan A approach with less than 2 strikes. These numbers prove why you should not go up there swinging at strikes with less than 2 strikes. You should not go up there saying, I'm going to swing at this, I'm going to cover the strike zone. I'm going to swing at things in the strike zone. You want to shrink it down to what they call over at fangraphs.com, the heart of the zone. So kind of well known, the heart of the strike zone, the middle of the strike zone. And I'm using these numbers from fangraphs.com. Fangraphs.com is a great website. When it comes to numbers, writing articles, it's a little advanced. I think it's much more suited for like college level coaches or really elite high school coaches, and definitely professional games. So youth coaches, I think you can get a little bit too much, a little paralysis by analysis and things like that. But what I'm going to do is try to take it and break it down. I know you guys could all understand it if you took the time. It's just, I don't think you want to spend all the time breaking down these statistics and being out there and understanding exactly what to gain from them and what to kind of use and draw from these statistics. But I want to share with you one that I think does stand out, that I think everybody here can use going out. Slugging percentage on pitches. So slugging percentage on pitches that are in the heart of the strike zone. Hitters have a higher slugging percentage by 37% when they swing at pitches that are in the heart of the strike zone rather than on the edges of the strike zone. So when hitters go up there with less than 2 strikes, these are major league numbers, but you could extrapolate from that and say this would be very similar to youth levels. It wouldn't be exact, but it would be similar. Slugging percentage, the amount of baseballs that are hit hard and driven hard, are 37% higher on pitches that are in the heart of the strike zone versus those pitches that are near the edges of the strike zone. So technically they're both in the strike zone, or at least close enough to be strikes. And if you swing it, so that's basically what you're saying is, if you look at hot zones for hitters, if you ever go Google hot zones for a hitter, like find your favorite hitter and look at their hot zone, their hitting zones, the strike zone will have spots in it, though it'll have zones in the strike zone that the hitters don't really do very well at by swinging at those pitches. They may actually be below average hitters in those areas. They might have, like, say, a basic statistic that everybody kind of understands is batting average. They may be like a 150 hitter on the upper right corner, the lower left corner, but on the heart of the zone or inner third or outer third, depending on the hitter, it could be 3 times higher in terms of productivity if you break it down. Different stats. I throw out batting average. I'm not a big batting average fan. In fact, for those of you that still use batting average percentage, it's a very flawed stat. I mean, initially, it just doesn't even count walks, which is a huge flaw. So it doesn't even count getting hit by a pitch or a walk, which to me should automatically disqualify it from being something that's really used as a measuring stick or an assessment tool to gauge hitter productivity. But nonetheless, a lot of coaches, most coaches, are familiar with what range of batting average is good and not good. The batting average is 27% higher when hitters swing at pitches that cross through the heart of the strike zone, not on the fringes. So it's 27% higher when hitters swing at the pitches that come right down the middle, right down the heart of the strike zone versus those that are on the edges of the strike zone. Again, these pitches could all be considered strikes. Most of these pitches that they're talking about on the edges of the strike zone are actually in the strike zone, but hitters are 20% more productive in terms of batting average and 37% more productive when it comes to slugging percentage. So this is really, I think, just statistically something that makes a lot of sense. It's just so important that you go up there with less than 2 strikes. When you're coaching hitters to go up there with less than 2 strikes, you're not just going up there to swing at strikes. You're going up there, hitters should be going up there with less than 2 strikes to swing at pitches that they can drive, to swing at pitches that they can really drive. That may be half of the strike zone. It may be a third of the strike zone. It may be 2/3 of the strike zone, depending on how good your hitter is. But they are going up there swinging at pitches that are in the heart of the zone that they can really drive and do some damage on. With the idea being, if you're not down to your last strike, don't take high risk at trying to get a hit on a pitch that's most likely going to lead to an out. All right. Swing at pitches that give you a better percentage of getting a hit out of them when you don't, or I should say when you're not down to your last strike, less than 2 strikes. When there's 2 strikes, you're down to your last strike. So you have to change it up a little bit. But I wanted to share that less than 2 strikes, some quantified evidence, 37% better slugging percentage when hitters swing at pitches in the heart of the strike zone versus the edges of the strike zone. So don't teach your hitters. Hitters, don't go up there with less than 2 strikes looking just to swing at strikes. You're looking at pitches that are in the heart of the strike zone. And the heart of the strike zone, the way they're measuring it, is approximately 2/3 of the strike zone area. It's a vertical rectangle that's the same shape as the strike zone, and it's about 2/3 the size. So you know how you make your hitter better? You know how you make your hitter 37% more likely to slug, or 37% better at slugging, which is essentially doing some damage on the ball? You make them, or you get them, and hitters, you swing at pitches that are in the heart of the zone versus the fringe of the zone, less than 2 strikes. Now with 2 strikes, you go to plan B, plan 2, and of course, at that time, you're going to have to swing at those pitches on the fringe. But with less than 2 strikes, an instantaneous 37% plus or minus, I know this is major league numbers, and that's not going to necessarily be exactly what your hitters are going to do, and even your hitters are going to vary individually, but 37% of hitters in the major league level would do better by just swinging at pitches in the heart of the zone versus swinging at pitches on the fringe when it comes to slugging percentage and batting average, a stat that everybody's kind of familiar with what's good and bad. 27% higher batting average just by swinging at pitches in the heart of the zone and not swinging at pitches on the fringes of the strike zone, on the outskirts of the strike zone. So right there, you're getting a 27% batting average increase, a 37% slugging increase just by swinging at better pitches. You're not doing anything to your swing necessarily. Your swing could stay the same. No matter how athletic your players are, no matter how physically gifted they are or not physically gifted they are, if you can get them to have better plate discipline and swing at the pitches in the heart of the strike zone, pitches that they can really drive with less than 2 strikes, and lay off those pitches that are more what I would call pitcher's pitches with less than 2 strikes, you're going to have a big difference in production. A big difference in production. And to give you an idea, 37% higher slugging percentage, a 27% higher batting average across the board. If all your players did this 1 through 9 or 1 through 10, if you got a DH out there, this is a game changer. I think it's important that we understand the importance, and I wanted to share these numbers with you, to share with you and kind of highlight and illustrate the importance of not just swinging at any pitch, and definitely not just swinging at anything in the strike zone with less than 2 strikes, but swinging at pitches in the heart of the strike zone, which is essentially about 2/3 of the strike zone. All right, my awesome listeners, I get fired up. I see the numbers coming out every week, and the numbers keep going up. Coaches listening to this, parents, players listening to this podcast. It fires me up. It makes me want to keep putting out great content, or at least do my best to share with you things that I think are super, super valuable for all you coaches and players. 2021 is here. We got a good year. I'm really excited about this year for the 80/20 baseball community. I'm going to continue to bring you guys the good stuff. Thank you for listening. I look forward to seeing you next Tuesday for episode 60. Episode 60. And until next week, as always, take care of yourself, take care of your families, and take this information and go out there, make the baseball community a better place, make it a better environment, get your players better, and have more fun along the way. All right, everybody, I'll catch you on the flip side. Take care.
This has been the 80/20 Baseball Masterclass. Take it to the field.